The Zodiac Sea-chron is the latest chronograph from the Fossil-owned brand, and this one uses a similar case to the 42 millimeter dive case from the Super Seawolf Pro Diver series, modded to be a chronograph using a Sellita SW510B bi-compact chronograph movement with a 62-hour power reserve, an even beefier look than the diver with the same style bezel, a large crown, and a vintage style 5-link bracelet. New, of course, is the dial, shown here in the reverse panda dial, but there is also a blue dial version. Now, this watch is not the latest from Zodiac. For whatever reason, I didn't review this when it came out, but that's okay. Usually when those watches come out, everyone is on a deadline and rushing to get the video or blog out about it. And while it's nice to get something out right when it's released, I prefer to actually wear, use, and look over the watch for a while before doing the review, and I did just that with this piece. This Sea-chron in either configuration goes for $2,995, so $3,000, and that's not cheap. And at that price, there is quite a lot of competition and a lot of big name brands, if you will. So let's see how this Sea-chron from Zodiac stacks up. So let's talk pricing first, because I do think that a $3,000 Zodiac is a hard pill to swallow for many. And let's face it, Zodiac watches have been moving upwards in price the last few years, like many other brands, so they're not alone in asking for more money for their watches. Like currently, many are complaining about Christopher Ward doing the same thing. But what about this Zodiac Sea-chron? Initially, I thought it was their Pro Diver range with the chronograph, using a lot of the same parts. And while some things are similar, the case is actually a little different as well as thicker. One thing many are happy to see though is that this is not using an STP movement, but a Sellita movement. But I started to think and I started to look around at some other automatic chronographs from some of the more known brands, or billboard brands if you will. Mido, Tissot, Hamilton, they can all be had around the $2,000 price point. Some even cheaper at $1,800 is the Tissot PRX chronograph using the Valjoux A05 H31 caliber movement with the 60-hour power reserve. And for those that like to see the movement, you get an exhibition crystal on the back, and I have to say, it's quite a good looking movement. The Zodiac Sea-chron has a solid case back, pretty much the same case back from the Pro Diver. And if we go closer to the Sea-chron price point, we get the Longines Avigation Big Eye, which is current MSRP is $3,000 on their website and cheaper through some dealers and gray market sellers. And then beyond that, you have the Oris Diver 65 chronograph for around $4,000 using the same base SW510 movement. And a Tag Heuer has quartz chronos in the $2,300 range. And if you want a two-door Black Bay, they start around $5,000. So for about $1,000 less, there are quite a few options. Quite a few around the same price point, and for $1,000 more, some nice options as well. But we'll get back to the price here shortly. I'll go ahead and put up all the specs here on screen, and let's talk about what you are getting here. For those that haven't seen the Pro Diver, I'll direct you to my review of the newest version of the Pistachio full loom dial here. And as you look at that, you can see this is a similar watch, at least at first glance, but the case has more of a curve to the lugs as well as being a thicker case along with a new bracelet. Now, that's not a bad thing. When Zodiac released the Pro Diver a few years ago, it was the first time in quite a few years they had released an all-new model, and now this one was up from 39 and 40 millimeters, now at 42. Now, for those who wanted a newer Zodiac but can't or don't want a 40 millimeter piece, now they had a few options. The case here somewhat looks to be the same, but then it doesn't. With what I believed to be a similar case as well as similarly finished, but these lugs seem to be slightly more curved as the diver lugs are pretty straight, and this is a thicker case as well. It's still 316L steel, mostly brushed with some high polished chamfers on the case, and the crowns are polished as well as the bezel edge, and this polishing flows into the 5-link bracelet. It's a robust case, it's quite attractive, if not a little simple, but very clean and well finished. Since this is a standard chronograph, it functions like you would expect. Start and stop using the top pusher and bottom pusher to reset, all pretty familiar. The crowns have a nice feel to them and a good press, and the time crown is decently smooth, and I like that it's a pretty large crown so you don't have to fumble with it even if you have larger fingers. You also don't have to worry about a phantom crown position either, as this is a true no-date movement. The bezel again is the same as the Pro Diver, 120 clicks, has a sapphire insert, it's easy to grip, it locks into place where you put it. Like the Pro Divers, the bezel is fully loomed as well. But the real star of this Sea-chron is the dial. I have the reverse panda dial here, which of the two offered is easily my favorite. I think the blue with black subdials looks nice, but it's a little more subdued. This one stands out more, and I love the vibrant black and white aesthetic. And for those that are not aware, this is a modern version of a classic Zodiac chronograph, also called the Sea-chron, from the 60s. Now, taking a look at the vintage reference, you can see they did a pretty faithful recreation of it, with the dial layout being very similar. Yes, there are some differences, but it's a classic 3 subdial layout, no date, the exact same hour and minute hand, and that bezel insert layout is pretty much exact as well, though the vintage model has more of a flat bezel, and this one is more 50 fathom style. Of course, that one was 39 millimeters, and this one is 42, and you can see the other differences from the vintage to modern example, but the biggest one on that would be this is a sandwich dial. The subdials come from the bottom dial, and the indices are cutouts as well, with the loom applied to the bottom dial, and I especially love the Zodiac dot circle for the 12 o'clock indice, which does match the vintage reference. Everything else is as you would expect from a chronograph such as this. Your seconds, minutes, and hours for the chronograph, and the tachymeter scale around the dial, this time done in white to give a little more contrast. And then we have the movement, the Sellita SW510, in this case the 510B, which is the no-date version. Much like many of the Sellita movements, this one is also based on a familiar movement, this time the 7750. This is a bicompact chronograph with a 62-hour power reserve and 27 joules. Now, I've not experienced any issues with the movement, but I didn't think I would in like 2 weeks' time. But I did look around and found a few issues with Nevada and Christopher Ward, both who used this movement, but nothing crazy and not a lot of reported issues I could find. Other brands that use this movement or a variation of it are Oris and Titoni, among others. Now, one thing the website does not mention is which grade it is. And when a website doesn't mention it, I'll assume this is elaborate, as there are 3 grades of this movement: elaborate, top, and chronometer. I know this, it's definitely not a chronometer. On the wrist, it wears very similar to the Pro Diver, but it will feel a little larger with those chrono buttons. So think of it more as a 43 millimeter piece on the wrist, but for my 7.5 inch or 19.05 centimeter wrist, it's very comfortable. At this time, it only comes with the 5-link bracelet, again very similar to the vintage reference. It's dual deployant, it looks very nice, and it has those stretch links near the clasp for that little bit of extra room on those warm days. Now, my personal gripes with this bracelet are the pin and collar for the links and those polished links. They just get scratched up pretty easily, and I would prefer all brushed, but that's also easy to rectify with a brush pad if one chooses to do so. Lastly, we have the loom, and I'll give it a grade B. It's Super Luminova, of course, BGW9, and it lights up nicely, but it's not overly bright, and I don't expect it to be an all-night loom monster. It does the job, though, for a few hours, and it does look nice in the dark with that sandwich dial loom. When I first saw this watch, I thought it was just a chronograph version of the Pro Diver. But after getting it in hand, looking at the Pro Diver again, you could see there are a good amount of differences. The bezel is similar in design, but the markings are different. The case is slightly thicker and more curved, and this is a 5-link bracelet, not the 7-link engineer style. What I like about that is that if you have one of the Pro Divers, I think this looks different enough to own both, and they wear a little different as well. I do love the looks of this piece, as it is a beautiful dive chrono, again, in my opinion. I then learned about the vintage reference, and I really appreciate how Zodiac stayed true to the vintage model in many ways while still upgrading it with modern style and elements and the more modern 42mm size. I do wonder though, since the original piece was 39mm and with so many brands releasing sub 40mm watches, would it have made more sense to do it in 39mm? I think the movement being 30mm might have created an issue with that, but it still probably could have worked. Now, I for one love the 42mm size, but I'm betting there is a market for a vintage 39mm recreation. What do you all think? The size, the look, the price? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Of course, there will be a written review, and if you'd like to check that out as well as see my pictures, you can do so. And you can check out the Zodiac website for more info as well. Both are linked in the description. A like, a comment, and subscribing and turning on notifications is the best way to help out the channel and show your support, and it'll only take a minute. This is Don Evans from Watch Report. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.